Hi, and welcome to Searching for Answers. We're just glad that you're on board with us, so grab your Bible, and we are working our way through Amos, the fascinating prophet who, as I understand, lived some years ago. 2,700 or something in that neighborhood, I suppose? Is that about right?
Right.
Dr. Bernard Taylor, University research professor at Loma Linda University, expert in the Old Testament. Dr. Leo Ranzelin, New Testament scholar, Associate Dean of the Faculty of Religion in the School of Religion here at Loma Linda University. My name is John Jones, La Sierra University, and we're having an interesting time with this interesting character, Amos, who has some visions coming up that we'll be looking at shortly, and who has some stringent words to say in the hearing of these people in the northern kingdom of ancient Israel. So here we are, chapter 5. We'll back up and get a little bit of a running start, Leo, and then we'll move ahead with verse 18 or so. So get us into the text a bit, and let's see where it takes us.
So if I recall, last time we worked through chapter 5, 1 through 17. And in many ways, that section of the book of Amos was this funeral lament, in which, in very dramatic, poignant, and striking ways, Amos perhaps walked into the shrine there at Bethel or in the capital city of Samaria and said to his audience, yes, you're enjoying a great deal of economic prosperity and military security at this point in time, but the party is over. The time in which Yahweh will pass through you and bring judgment upon you has arrived. And so in order to impress that point, he crafts, as I said, just amazingly shocking, stunning language to get that point across to them. And I can just imagine the audience thinking, who does this person think he is to speak in those terms, because we're enjoying such a good time under King Jeroboam II.
He's lucky he didn't get stoned on the spot.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, but he's not done using some dramatic language and, if you will, reinterpreting one of the most important traditions of Israel, and that is the day of the Lord. Because the sense that you get in reading through other portions of the Old Testament and the prophetic literature was that the day of the Lord was going to be this day in which Yahweh was going to vanquish Israel's enemies and bring victory to Israel's enemy. And the ultimate great day of the Lord was a day of salvation. It was a day of light. It was a wonderful day in which Israel looked forward to. And so here comes Amos and says this, starting with chapter 5, verse 18. Alas, for you who desire the day of the Lord, why do you want the day of the Lord? It is darkness, not light, as if someone fled from a lion and was met by a bear, and went into the house and rested a hand against the wall and was bitten by a snake. Is not the day of the Lord darkness, not light, and gloom with no brightness in it?
Wow. Exactly. So here they say, God will surely do all the wonderful and good things for us while we are running away from this lion, and God turns out to be a bear.
Exactly. Yeah. And that aspect of 19, he makes very clear that Yahweh's judgment is inescapable and unavoidable. If you escape a lion, there's going to be a bear there. If you escape the precariousness outside, you come in the house and there's going to be a snake there awaiting you. So it's going to happen. Cannot be avoided.
Amos does know how to get one's attention, doesn't he?
Precisely.
Yeah. So with that, he's standing on its head.
Exactly.
The traditional thinking. Rather, life in this world is ambivalent and ambiguous. There's good and there's bad. We are comfortable. And that surely must mean that the Lord is on our side. And when the final kind of summing up of all things comes along, that same Lord who has blessed us with all these comforts and riches will just glorify us even more, and we will all be vindicated and we can gloat over everybody else who doesn't belong to God's chosen people, right?
Exactly. And many scholars feel that this is one of the signal contributions of the book of Amos to the prophetic literature, this dramatic, striking reinterpretation of the day of the Lord.
Where he pulls the rug out from under their feet. Where God pulls the rug out from under their feet in a way, isn't it? Yeah, anything else from your side, Leo, that
well, again, as I've said before, I try to place myself in the audience as Amos articulates these oracles of judgment, which are just almost unrelentingly dark and foreboding to an audience that is experiencing, as I said earlier, wealth and prosperity and well-being as they live in these large houses.
A winter house and a summer house.
Right, these fortresses. What is wrong with this person? So.
We are motivated generally more by our fears than by anything else, aren't we? And here he says, hey, even in this time of comfort and ease, you're still motivated by certain fears, and you think that those last remaining fears that you have will be taken away in the last day, and everything will be all on one side, the side of comfort and affirmation and goodness and ease and prosperity. Right. But guess what? There's more than you imagined, and I'll give you something to be afraid of.
Right.
I don't know. Would you like to have lunch with Amos or not? What would you ask him? You know. Yeah, pretty stringent words.
This shepherd, this herdsman, this dresser of sycamore trees from the south, right, the southern kingdom of Judah, Tekoa, just goes up there and pulls no punches and feels, it's clear from the book, called by Yahweh to articulate these oracles of judgment in the northern kingdom of Israel in the mid-8th century.
Yeah.
BC.
What can you tell us? Let me begin, Bernard, by simply asking you what jumps out at you here, and then.
I'm thinking it might be helpful to explain a little bit more about the expression "the day of the Lord."
Day of the Lord.
In the Hebrew, it's Yom Adonai, but in fact, as you have heard Leo mention, the day of Yahweh is in fact what the Hebrew says if we pronounce the name. But after the end of the Old Testament, with the development of Judaism ahead of the New Testament time, the custom was developed of not pronouncing the divine name because of the commandment that says, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And they said, well, we won't even mention it, then we will be immune from that. And so where it said Adonai, they would usually say, where it said Yahweh, they would usually say Adonai, although sometimes it was necessary to say Elohim to avoid an awkward expression. But, and this was translated, taken over into the Greek translation, the Septuagint, and they translated by Kurios. If you're musical, the only Greek in the Catholic Mass is the Kyrie eleison, opening words of Lord have mercy. And so in the Septuagint, the Greek translation, they use Kurios instead of the Hebrew Adonai. And in English, I don't know how far back, but at least as far as the King James, the standard developed of having a capital L and then the O-R-D in small caps. And you notice in your Bible that that is the way that you have it.
So that signals us that ultimately back behind this word Lord with capital letters, but small caps after the initial, there is the Hebrew Yahweh, but pronounced as Adonai, which means my Lord, literally.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, why do you desire the day of Yahweh? Well, because we're Yahweh's followers. You know, what a strange question. Why would you ask? You know, why are you called American? And so, why do you want the day of the Lord? He says a second time. It's darkness, not light. And it's sort of like undoing creation. Go back from light to darkness. And there are other references we'll see in chapter 6 or 7 about the deep, the tahom, which is in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2. It's the same Hebrew word that lies behind this.
So that would help us understand verse 20, particularly then. Darkness, not light, and gloom.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of like the primordial condition of the universe or of this world before God shapes it. You know,
Yes.
separates dry and wet and
It's
light, dark.
interesting to perhaps speculate about who in his audience would have made that connection, and how somebody like Amos, although he lives near Jerusalem and may have been up to the temple or something like that, but he seems to be well connected to the traditions and something as important as the creation narrative. And I remember when we were reading this in class many years ago, our professor had lived in Israel and had done some training there, and he told about how common this was. You know, you come into the house, some of the older houses, there may be a hole in the wall, you don't notice, you put up a hand, and then this viper will sting you. I remember as a boy reading of missionaries who'd gone overseas, and you know, scorpions and all these wild creatures, and in lots of different countries in that area.
Just when you think you're safe.
Yes, you go into the safety of home, and you're not paying enough attention, and that's what happens. So, is not the day of the Lord darkness, not light, and gloom with no brightness in it? What a reversal.
Exactly.
I thought I had it all taken care of. You know, it's like thinking you have all your retirement taken care of, and then something
Guess
happens
what?
to your money. You know, there goes your retirement. This was their retirement plan.
Oh dear.
And Dr. Jones, one thing we should add to this of these verses, just a few verses earlier, in the doxology of verse 8, Amos has been very clear that Yahweh is one who can darken the day into night.
Yes.
And he is, the sovereign power of his gets highlighted, of him being the creator of the heavens and the earth. And one of his abilities is to darken the day into night. And yet here he does that precisely with this reinterpretation of the day of the Lord. The other thing I think I'd like to add is, and not to get ahead of chapter 7 and, you know, the encounter with Amaziah and Amos. I mean, I think this kind of rhetoric is what Amaziah may be alluding to. Hey, Amos, the land is not able to bear all of your words. This is so striking and troubling. Perhaps one could even argue treasonous, right? Given how important the day of the Lord is within Israelite tradition. How could you speak of this day in these terms? God, you're kidding me.
And it's interesting that there is this righteous indignation attitude that is manifest, because in the north they have the calves that they worship and all of that. But when there is a sense of the nationalist pride being challenged, this is often the sort of thing that comes forth. But this has gone too far, because immediately prior he talks against Jeroboam, then Amaziah stands up and pulls the anger that the treason that you suggest that has been spoken against the leader,
I don't want to be too simplistic about this, but the priests are kind of on the side of the royalty, aren't they? The temple is built near to the king's palace, or vice versa. And so when Amaziah, the priest, speaks up, this is why it feels treasonous. Not merely heretical, which is bad enough, but as if it were really against the established political order of the day somehow, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which assumed no separation between church and state.
Yes, that's right, exactly so.
And the priests were supported, and the priests acknowledged the support by the kind words which were spoken in response.
Yeah.
There used to be that there was a lot of animosity read into this between priest and prophet.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really the case, although it doesn't mean that moments didn't occur like
would
this.
flare
as we
up,
see.
yeah. You know, it's really a clever argument in a way, because if before creation everything is dark and everything's a mishmash, day and night are not separated, dry land and water are not separated, the day of the Lord, then you can kind of make the argument that it's a reversal. It has the potential to at least go back to that primordial chaotic condition again. So if God is the one who can pull morning out of deep darkness, verse 8 of chapter 5, now we have to ask, is he going to call for the waters of the sea and pour them out again on the surface of the earth?
Right.
This is chapter 5, verse 8. We see that it really represents a kind of a bookend to the Genesis 1 story, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So here we are. This really gets everybody's attention.
Yes, it does.
And,
It's dramatic.
and now Amos, you know, Amos is speaking in his own voice here. Alas for you who desire the day of the Lord, and so forth. But when we come to 21, the next paragraph, 21 through 24, Amos shifts his voice, and he begins to speak indeed in the voice of Adonai, of the Lord, yeah? Right?
Yes.
So, Bernard, let's put this paragraph alongside the paragraph we just read, and then see what we can make of them.
All right. I'm reading from verse 21 of Amos chapter 5. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Famous words.
Yes.
Yeah.
And justly so.
Yes.
It comes from Amos.
Right. And Leo, you just drew our attention to the earlier passage you quoted, and here is another one so nearby. This is inspired and inspiring.
Yes.
It really is. We're hearing Amos speaking on behalf of the Lord, but he has come to a conclusion here, and in fact, at the end of in the beginning of the next chapter, we move in another direction, and from the depths come the elevation perhaps of a waterfall, but we need to say some things before verse 24, though it's easy to move straight to that because it's such amazing imagery. So, I despise your festivals. These are the 3 solemn festivals. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies is the parallel in the same verse. And just pausing to mention, this is Hebrew poetry. You say it once and you say it again, sometimes in the same vein, sometimes on the opposite. Here is the heart of their religion, the pilgrimage festivals. Now, Jeroboam set up the calves to keep the people in the north so they wouldn't go back to Jerusalem for camp meeting. And
take their offerings with them.
yes, and take the offerings with them.
Right.
Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and your grain offerings, I will not accept them.
Yeah.
Now, God suddenly seems ungracious.
Yeah.
They're doing their best, they're following the rules, and it's not working. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. That's a sacrifice. All of the feed and the grain to bring to a state of fatness and ready to be sacrificed or slaughtered and eaten. What a waste of resources. It's not being accepted. Why does God have to be so difficult? And then the worship participation. I don't like the noise of your songs. I'll not listen to the melody of your harps. So here is Amos, who has progressed, moved along. He's on a roll, but he is not solely on one side, on the side of Yahweh. He is delivering what they need to hear, but are not drawn to it nor inclined to listen because they are complacent with how things are. They believe they have it down pat and the machinery works well.
Yeah, that's the real problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
We routinized the ceremonies.
Exactly.
Yeah, and kind of flattened out the sacraments and rituals, and we do it in a kind of an offhand way, as a way of just keeping the bases covered upstairs, so to speak, while we engage in very wrongful behavior down here below.
Yeah.
You know, it's stunning, it's astonishing to think of God saying to these people, I hate your religious rituals. But make no mistake, the very last book of the Hebrew Scriptures of the Old Testament, we've got it all over again. God, in just in passing, in Malachi, the opening chapter, first chapter, he says, I just wish you would close up your temple doors and put out the fire on the altar and be done with it. This is verse 10 of chapter 1. I have no pleasure in you. I will not accept any of these offerings anymore from your hands. Yeah. You turn up your noses and you say it smells bad, smells like a slaughterhouse. Well, what gave you the idea that I like it? You know? Now back to Amos. But the point is that these 12 minor prophets are singing the same tune in some ways across them all, aren't they?
Right. Yeah. And to the best of our knowledge, Amos is laying the foundation.
Yeah, right. He seems to be the earliest of them, doesn't
Yes,
he?
yes. And it's taken, you know, the message to foreign nations, for instance, that's picked up. And in the written prophets, Jeremiah and Ezekiel, these get very long and detailed, and, well, also in Isaiah as well.
Yeah.
But after all of these, you know, hating and that strong language that we've just heard, then Amos plays his trump card. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And if you're not familiar with this, it is easy to miss how apropos his words are, because the waters that flow down, this is the wadi, the stream that flows when it rains. And he's calling for an ever-flowing stream that would normally dry up. This is contrary to nature. And that's how fast and swift the blessings need to flow, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Justice and righteousness. These are the concerns of God. And it's interesting to note that it is not fully verbalized, the relationship between 21 to 23 and verse 24, because it just says, but let justice roll down. But this is the antidote. This is what has troubled Amos from the outset.
Yeah.
And his God is also concerned. Worship is important, but when that becomes an end in itself and people are not being taken care of, there is no concern for the poor, all that we have read about, this should be what defines, this is who we should be. And our worship then is an outpouring of our gratitude to God for who He is and what He has helped us to be able to do, and that everybody is living in peace and harmony and justice and righteousness. This is what they were created for, and Amos has caught that spirit.
Yeah. So we read the text today, justice, righteousness, and we think of obedience of the commandments, keeping the 10, But this is not some mechanical, mere obedience. This has got to do with our attitude toward one another.
Exactly.
And if we think we are the chosen people, it may be precisely toward the non-chosen people, in some sense of the word, in that day, that they are to be open-hearted and generous of spirit. That's news, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it would seem. Yeah. It turns out then that the picture that's being painted for us is a picture of abundance, isn't it? You can almost hear the water roar, This is no mere trickle. This is not grudging. This is forceful. And there are still, these words resonate for us still today, don't they? On the campus where I work, we have a kind of a fountain up front and center of the campus. Water flowing out of a rock is reminiscent of Moses striking the rock and the water gushing forth. And carved into the rock are these words: let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And that water, that fountain is kept running day and night on campus for a good reason. I think there's a kind of a lesson behind all of that. The point is that God is open-hearted and generous of spirit, and if we would reflect the divine image in this world, we would not be limited or churlish or grudging about what we pass on to others. This is searching for answers.